It's time to say a not-so-fond farewell to Dr. Anthony Fauci, the patron saint and pope of the COVID Karens. He's retiring and on a $350,000 a year pension, too, which seems like a lot, but it's frankly small change compared to the trillions of dollars he cost America thanks to lockdowns, school closures, delayed medical treatment, destroyed businesses, and on and on and on. Let's be clear. When it comes to the pandemic, just about everything Fauci did made it worse. Whether or not it was the ultimate source of the virus, Fauci's National Institutes of Health funded controversial gain-of-function research into bat coronaviruses in Wuhan. What a coincidence. Something that he only admitted after emails came out proving that he knew about it. Oh, and speaking of those emails, they also proved that he led a coordinated effort to shut down the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration, respected scientists who were making the case that lockdowns don't work to save lives. Just look at Sweden. Why would you think that? He also flip-flopped on masks, was a tyrant on vaccines, and he claimed that he never ordered shutdowns of the economy.
I didn't shut down anything.
I recommended to the president that we shut the country down. And the only way to do that is by draconian means of essentially shutting down a country. We know that we can do that if we shut down.
Well, I think one of the things you really need to do, to the extent that you can shut down temporarily the country, I think is important.
And he even claimed to be the literal manifestation of the holy, blessed science, the health mandate made flesh, as it were. Oh, he's not going to leave until December, of course, but as far as I'm concerned, the day he goes can't come soon enough. Anyway, let's give the last word on Fauci to Florida governor and potential next president of the United States, Ron DeSantis.
And I'm just sick of seeing him. I know he says he's going to retire. Someone needs to grab that little elf and chuck him across the Potomac.
Time to bring in the Australian's Washington correspondent, Adam Creighton, who has brilliantly followed the lies and deceit from COVID dictator Fauci. Adam, thank you so much for joining us. Now,
thanks, James.
Adam, Anthony Fauci has a long history of being wrong. Why did so many Americans, and even from afar Australians, fall under the charlatan spell?
Yeah, well, certainly he does have a long history of being wrong. I mean, going back to the AIDS crisis in the 1980s, he famously wrote an article that suggested the disease could be caught in just ordinary household transmission, which of course caused a huge scare right around the world, and there really wasn't evidence at that point to argue that. So that was just the first case, and then of course fast forward almost 40 years to the colossal series of mistakes that you've well outlined there. And to more directly answer your question, it's a very hard question. We clearly have a lot of faith in government. I think people like to say that they don't trust government, et cetera, but when this COVID pandemic came along, these crazy measures, these measures that were not in the pandemic plan of any country in the world, were very popular, except for, say 10, 15% of the population, including you, including me, and people believed Fauci. And the results are just terrible. I mean, if you look around the world right now, you've got excess deaths in the US, in Europe, and I think in Australia as well, 15, 20% higher than they should be. And these facts aren't really getting much coverage, but certainly they must be related to the measures that were introduced in 2020 and 2021. These disastrous measures which have left the US with the largest increase in debt pretty much of any Western country, and also the most deaths. It's very frustrating for me when I hear from Australians say, "Oh, the US didn't do anything and it didn't follow this, it didn't follow the rules." Well, actually, it did. I mean, it did exactly pretty much what Fauci recommended, including the shutdowns. And the vast bulk of states did that. They shut down, in some cases, multiple times, and they had the highest number of deaths as well. So, those two facts next to each other suggest that the so-called science, the measures, failed miserably.
And Novak Djokovic is still being thwarted by these rules in America, isn't that right?
Yeah. Yes, look, that's true. He just announced this morning, actually, that he won't be flying to New York on Monday because he won't be let in. I mean, it's actually quite interesting. A little anecdote. last week I flew back from London to New York, and I must say no one checked my Vax card. So I think that the rule is written down as such, but maybe it's not it's not being implemented thoroughly. But nevertheless, it's a completely demented rule. Of course, it only applies to foreigners and not to Americans, which of course has no scientific basis whatsoever. And it's just a reminder that these rules, once they're introduced, they're very, very hard to take away. Bureaucrats and politicians like them. They become politicized. And that's why it's so important that people like you and me very aggressively fight the introduction of these rules in the first place.